Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Imagine finding a small silver coins hidden inside an old coin jar, a family collection, an inherited box, or even a forgotten drawer. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an odd detail-cent coin. But then you turn it over, look at the date, and suddenly you see three important details. Coin number 1. Today we are taking a very close look at one of the most interesting silver dimes from the final year of the classic silver Roosevelt Dime era, the 1964 with D Roosevelt Dime. This small 10-cent coin may look ordinary at first glance, but it carries an important piece of American history. It was produced at the Denver Mint in 1964. It contains 90% silver, and it represents the final regular issue year in which Roosevelt dimes were struck with the traditional silver composition before the United States Mint changed the dime to a copper-nickel-clad composition. And today, we are focusing specifically on a 1964 Roosevelt dime with the D Mint mark, described as being in very fine condition, with a market figure of around $115 being discussed. But before you rush to your coin collection and assume that every 1964 D dime is automatically worth $115, there are several very important details that every collector needs to understand. The first thing to understand is exactly what the 1964 D Roosevelt dime is. The coin features the portrait of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the obverse facing left. Roosevelt's portrait appears on the dime because the coin was introduced in 1946, shortly after his death, in recognition of his leadership and his connection to the March of Dimes campaign, which helped raise money for the fight against polio. The reverse features a torch in the center, surrounded by an olive branch on one side and an oak branch on the other. Around these designs are the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and one dime. When you hold a 1964 with D Roosevelt dime in your hand, you are holding more than just 10 cents. You are holding a small piece of American history from a period when the nation's circulating coinage was about to undergo a major transformation. Another major attraction of this coin is its silver content. The 1964 Roosevelt dime was made from an alloy containing 90% silver and 10% copper. The coin has a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters and a standard weight of about 2.5 grams. That silver composition gives the 1964 with D dime an intrinsic precious metal component that modern clad dimes do not have. This is one reason collectors and silver enthusiasts continue to pay attention to Roosevelt dimes from 1964 and earlier. Even when a circulated example does not command a major numismatic premium, the silver content gives it a value that goes beyond the 10-cent face value printed into the design. Another fascinating aspect of the 1964 with D Roosevelt dime is that there are known varieties connected with the Denver issue. Collectors have studied different mint mark characteristics and other varieties, including examples involving repunched mint marks and misplaced mint mark attributions. These varieties can be much more interesting to specialists than a standard example. However, you should never assume that a strange-looking mint mark automatically means you have a valuable variety. Coin varieties need to be identified carefully, preferably using recognized references or professional attribution services. If you have a 1964 with D Roosevelt dime at home and you believe it might be worth around $115, the first thing you should do is resist the temptation to clean it. This is extremely important. Do not use silver polish, toothpaste, vinegar, abrasive cloths, chemicals, or household cleaning products. Cleaning can leave scratches, hairlines, unnatural surfaces, or other evidence of alteration. A coin that might have been collectible can become considerably less desirable after improper cleaning. If you want to remove dirt from a coin, you should first learn the proper conservation practices or consult a professional rather than experimenting with household products. The second step is to weigh the coin if you have an accurate digital scale suitable for small objects. A normal 1964 with D Roosevelt dime should weigh approximately 2.5 grams. However, small differences can occur because of wear and manufacturing tolerances. Weight alone cannot prove authenticity, but it can help identify coins that deserve additional investigation. You can also measure the diameter, examine the edge, and compare the coin with known genuine examples. Remember that valuable coins are sometimes counterfeited, so authentication becomes increasingly important as the potential value increases. The third step is to examine the coin under good lighting and magnification. Look for unusual doubling, strange mint mark characteristics, die cracks, repunched features, or other unusual details. But be careful, because damage can look like a mint error. Scratches, dents, machine doubling, post-mint damage, and environmental deterioration can easily be mistaken for valuable varieties. A true collectible variety generally has characteristics that can be matched to established references rather than simply looking unusual. The 1964 with D. Roosevelt Dime also has tremendous historical significance because 1964 was the final year of regular silver Roosevelt Dime production. Beginning in the mid-1960s, the United States faced rising silver prices and increasing pressure on the nation's silver coinage system. The composition of circulating dimes and quarters was changed to a copper-nickel-clad system. That transition makes 1964 Roosevelt dimes especially recognizable to collectors. When you hold one, you are looking at the end of an era in American circulating coinage. There is also an emotional side to collecting these coins. Imagine a dime struck in Denver in 1964. It may have entered circulation in a time when American life looked completely different from today. It could have been carried in a person's pocket, placed into a cash register, used in a vending machine, or passed from one family member to another. It may have traveled across several states before eventually ending up in a collection decades later. The small marks and wear on the coin can be evidence that it actually lived a life in circulation. And that is what makes coin collecting so fascinating. A 1964 with D dime does not need to be a $1,000 rarity to be interesting. Its age, silver composition, historical context, Denver mint mark, Roosevelt design, and connection to the end of silver circulating coinage already make it an important collectible. Of course, when a particular example has an unusual variety, exceptional preservation, full bands, or professional certification, the story can become even more interesting. For collectors who are searching through old coins, the 1964 with D. Roosevelt Dime is a date worth recognizing. When you see 1964, immediately check for the D mint mark. Then examine the overall condition. Is the coin heavily worn? Is it fine, very fine, extremely fine, about uncirculated, or does it appear to have never circulated? After that, inspect the strike and the torch bands. Then look for recognized varieties and possible errors. Finally, compare your findings with reliable references and recent completed sales. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is focusing entirely on the date and mint mark while ignoring condition. A 1964 with D dime in ordinary circulated condition is a very different coin from a beautifully preserved certified example. The market recognizes that difference. In fact, professional grading scales exist precisely because relatively small differences in preservation can produce major differences in collector demand. For viewers who are new to coin collecting, remember that professional certification can be particularly useful when the potential value is high enough to justify the expense. A grading service can authenticate the coin, assign a standardized grade, and encapsulate it in a protective holder. Certification does not guarantee that you will receive a specific price, but it can make it easier for buyers and sellers to understand exactly what they are looking at. Now let's imagine that you find a 1964 with D. Roosevelt Dime in an old family collection. It looks attractive, has a clear date, and the D mint mark is visible. You examine it under magnification and notice that the design is still fairly strong, but there is obvious wear on the high points. That sounds much more like a circulated coin than a mint state coin. You then compare it with professional grading standards and determine that very fine might be a reasonable description. At that point, you should not automatically attach a $115.00 price tag to it. Instead, you should determine whether there is something special about that particular coin that explains the higher price. This is an important lesson for everyone watching this video. Condition words have specific meanings in numismatics. Very fine is not simply another way of saying looks very good. It represents a defined level of wear. Similarly, extremely fine, about uncirculated, and mint state are not casual descriptions. They are part of a standardized grading system used by collectors and dealers. Understanding these terms can prevent costly mistakes. The silver content also deserves attention. Because the 1964 with D Roosevelt Dime contains 90% silver, its base value is connected to the prevailing price of silver. Precious metal prices can change every day, which means the melt-related component of the coin's value is not permanently fixed. On top of that, collector value can rise above the metal value when a coin has desirable condition, rarity, or special characteristics. This combination of bullion value and numismatic value is one reason silver Roosevelt dimes remain popular. Next, coin number 2. This 1963 amperes small d mint mark, and a condition that makes the coin look dark or almost black. Could this little Roosevelt dime really be worth $116 in today's market? That is exactly what we are investigating in today's video. We are taking a deep look at the 1963 with D Roosevelt dime, its history, silver content, Denver mint production, condition, possible varieties, and the reasons why some examples can attract dramatically higher prices than ordinary circulated coins. Before we go any further, there is one very important point every coin collector needs to understand. A coin's advertised price is not necessarily the same thing as its actual market value. You may see a 1963 with D Roosevelt dime listed online for $116.00, $150.00, or even much more. But an asking price does not automatically mean someone has actually paid that amount. The true value of a coin depends on its exact condition, originality, certification, variety, strike quality, eye appeal, and what buyers are actually willing to pay. Current NGC information shows that the 1963 with D Roosevelt dime is common in circulated grades, with circulated examples generally listed around the $5 range. That means if you have a coin being presented as worth $116, there should be a specific reason for that premium. And finding that reason is where the real treasure hunt begins. There is something historically fascinating about holding a 1963 with D Roosevelt dime. This coin was produced during the final years of America's traditional silver circulating coinage. The Roosevelt dime series began in 1946, and for many years these dimes were made from a silver alloy. The 1963 with D is therefore part of the closing chapter of the original silver Roosevelt dime era. By 1963, concerns about silver supplies, rising silver prices, coin shortages, and increasing public hoarding were becoming major issues. The United States would soon change the composition of its circulating dimes and quarters. Beginning in 1965, the dime would no longer contain the traditional 90% silver composition used on the 1964 and earlier Roosevelt dimes. That means the 1963 with D Roosevelt dime is not just an old coin. It is a genuine silver coin from the final years before one of the biggest changes in modern American coinage. According to NGC, the 1963D dime contains 90% silver and 10% copper. It weighs approximately 2.5 grams, has a diameter of about 17.9 millimeters, and contains approximately 723 troy ounce of silver. Its silver content alone gives the coin a value considerably greater than its original 10-cent face value, although the exact bullion value changes with the price of silver. NGC's published information in 2026 places the melt value around $4 to $4.50 depending on the date of the quoted silver price. But there is a major difference between a common coin and a common coin in exceptional condition. Millions of 1963 with D Roosevelt dimes were produced, but many spent years moving through circulation. They were carried in pockets, placed into cash registers, dropped onto sidewalks, exposed to moisture, rubbed against other coins, and eventually damaged or worn. As a result, finding an example with truly exceptional surfaces and strong original detail can be much more interesting than simply finding the date and mint mark. This brings us to the condition described for the coin in today's video. You mentioned a black condition, and this could refer to a dark appearance, black toning, heavy discoloration, or a coin with dark surfaces. This is extremely important because dark color does not automatically mean the coin is more valuable. In fact, the appearance could have several different causes. A silver coin can develop natural toning over decades because of chemical reactions with its surrounding environment. Depending on the storage conditions, the toning may appear gray, brown, blue, gold, purple, or very dark. Some collectors appreciate attractive natural toning, while others prefer bright, original-looking silver surfaces. However, there is a major difference between natural toning and damage. A coin that has been exposed to harsh chemicals, burned, buried in damaging soil, coated with substances, or aggressively cleaned, may develop dark or unnatural surfaces. If the black appearance is caused by damage rather than natural toning, the coin's collector value can actually decrease. This is why you should never assume that a black or dark coin is automatically a rare coin. The 1963 with D Roosevelt Dime is particularly interesting because NGC notes that the issue is relatively short on collectible varieties despite its massive production. One variety of special interest is a double die reverse. That does not mean every 1963 with D dime with a strange-looking reverse is automatically a double die. True varieties must be identified using recognized diagnostics. What may appear to be doubling under a magnifying glass could instead be machine doubling, die deterioration, damage, or simple wear. According to current NGC information, ordinary circulated 1963 with D Roosevelt dimes are generally valued around $5. NGC also reports that extremely high-grade uncirculated examples can reach dramatically higher prices, with pristine examples selling for thousands of dollars in the right circumstances. That enormous difference demonstrates how powerful condition can be in the coin market. A coin with the same date and mint mark can be worth only a few dollars in circulated condition, but thousands if it reaches an exceptional certified grade. Imagine two collectors each have a 1963 with D Roosevelt dime. The first collector has a heavily circulated coin with scratches, dark surfaces, and considerable wear. The second collector has a sharply struck, beautifully preserved, professionally certified example with exceptional detail. Both coins have the same date and the same D mint mark, but the market can treat them as completely different coins. This is why coin grading is so important. Natural toning can sometimes become very attractive over time. A silver coin stored in an old paper envelope, album, cardboard holder, or other environment may develop layers of color as it reacts with sulfur and other chemicals in the surrounding material. Some collectors specifically seek beautifully toned silver coins. However, extremely dark or unattractive toning may not bring a premium. The market is subjective, and eye appeal can vary from collector to collector. Another important point is the coin's authenticity. Whenever a coin is claimed to be worth over $100, authentication becomes more important. Counterfeiters have been producing altered and fake coins for a very long time. An altered mint mark, a damaged date, or a plated coin can sometimes fool an inexperienced collector. Fortunately, a careful examination of weight, diameter, edge, design details, surface characteristics, and die markers can help identify suspicious pieces. For valuable examples, professional authentication and grading can provide additional confidence. So if your 1963 with D dime is dark, do not immediately throw it away, and do not immediately celebrate either. Examine it carefully. Take clear photographs of the obverse and reverse. Photograph the D mint mark. Photograph the torch bands. Photograph any unusual doubling or markings. Look at the edge. Weigh the coin if possible. Then compare it with reliable numismatic references. And most importantly, do not clean it. If the coin appears to have potential, consider taking it to an experienced coin dealer or professional numismatist. If the potential value is significant, professional grading may be worth considering. A reputable grading service can authenticate the coin and assign a standardized grade. Certification can make a major difference when buyers are evaluating higher value coins because they know the coin has been examined by an independent grading service. Next coin, number 3. This United States 1962 Roosevelt Dime with no mint mark, especially an example in very fine condition. We are going to examine the history of the coin, the meaning of the missing mint mark, its silver content, its condition, its rarity, the mistakes collectors commonly make when identifying this coin, and most importantly, what a coin like this may actually be worth in today's market. And there is something very important you need to know right at the beginning. A 1962 Roosevelt Dime without a mint mark is not automatically a rare error coin. In fact, the absence of a mint mark on a 1962 dime is exactly what we normally expect from a coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Philadelphia did not use a mint mark on these Roosevelt dimes. So when you see a 1962 dime with no letter next to the torch on the reverse, don't immediately assume that the mint forgot to stamp the coin. In this case, the missing mint mark is generally normal. That fact alone can completely change the value of the coin. The 1962 Roosevelt Dime is part of the famous Roosevelt Dime series that began in 1946, shortly after the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The coin was designed by John R. Sinnock, and the Roosevelt Dime became one of the most recognizable 10-cent coins in American history. During this period, the United States was still producing Roosevelt dimes in 90% silver, which means that these older dimes have intrinsic precious metal value in addition to their collectible value. The coin in today's discussion is described as being in very fine condition. In the world of coin collecting, very fine is generally abbreviated as VF. A very fine coin has experienced significant circulation, but the major design details remain clearly visible. On the obverse, you should be able to see President Roosevelt's portrait clearly. The hair, facial features, ear, and other design elements will show wear compared with an uncirculated coin, but the overall portrait should still have strong definition. Look closely at the highest points of Roosevelt's portrait. These areas receive the most contact during circulation and therefore show wear first. The cheek, hair, forehead, and other raised portions of the design can become smoother over time. That is why two 1962 Roosevelt dimes can have completely different market values, even though they have exactly the same date and mint origin. One may be worth little more than its silver value and modest collector premium, while another exceptionally preserved example could be worth substantially more. This is where the discussion of the $117 figure becomes important. Coin collecting is a condition-sensitive hobby. The difference between a circulated coin and an exceptional mint state coin can be enormous. Now, let's talk about the silver. This is one of the most interesting aspects of the 1962 Roosevelt Dime. Unlike modern Roosevelt dimes, the 1962 issue is a 90% silver coin. That means even an ordinary circulated example has a relationship to the precious metal market. The coin contains approximately 723 troy ounce of silver when originally struck. Of course, the actual amount of silver you can recover from an individual coin is not necessarily the same thing as the coin's retail market price, because collectors, dealers, buyers, sellers, premiums, and silver prices all influence what someone is willing to pay. But the silver content gives the coin a meaningful baseline link is also one reason collectors enjoy finding Roosevelt dimes from the 1946 through 1964 period. These coins represent an important chapter in American monetary history. So if someone tells you that your 1962 dime is rare solely because it has no mint mark, be careful. The edge should not look completely smooth. You should also pay attention to the weight. A normal coin is approximately 2.50 grams when new, although a circulated coin can experience slight weight loss through wear. A scale accurate to at least 1/100th of a gram can be useful for preliminary examination. However, weight alone does not authenticate a coin. Collectors of Roosevelt dimes pay special attention to full bands, sometimes abbreviated FB or full torch in certain contexts. A strong, complete separation of the horizontal bands can make a high-grade Roosevelt dime much more desirable. However, full bands generally become most important in higher mint state grades, not simply because a circulated coin happens to show some detail. That coin could be much more interesting to a specialist than a typical worn example. This is why collectors sometimes search through old rolls, collections, inherited coin jars, and estate accumulations. Most coins will not be treasures, but occasionally an unusual or high-grade example can stand out. Another important factor is toning. Silver coins naturally react with their environment over time. A 1962 dime might have grey toning, golden toning, rainbow colors, or darker areas depending on its storage history. Natural toning is not automatically a defect. In some cases, attractive natural toning can even increase collector-linked official toning, however, can be a completely different story. The Roosevelt Dime therefore represents more than 10 link, represents an important connection between American politics, public health, wartime history, and the development of modern American coinage. When you hold a 1962 example, you are holding a small piece of that story. And because the coin is made of silver, it also represents the final generation of traditional silver circulating coinage before the United States moved toward copper-nickel-clad dimes. That transition makes Roosevelt dimes from this era especially popular with beginning collectors. But if you have a particular example that has been professionally graded, has a significant variety or error, has exceptional characteristics, or has documentation supporting a $117 market price, then the situation can be different. The most important thing is to identify exactly what coin you have, and if the coin appears significantly better than ordinary circulated examples, consider having it examined by a professional. The difference between an ordinary coin and a valuable coin is sometimes extremely subtle. A few tiny details can make a major difference. That is one of the reasons coin collecting is so fascinating. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1962 Roosevelt Dime, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos about rare coins, old silver coins, valuable dimes, mint errors, varieties, and hidden treasures that could still be sitting in collections today.